Hey there, pickle friends. Welcome back to Inside the Pickle Jar. So, if you've ever had a moment where your emotions just came out of nowhere, like hot and fast and way bigger than the situation seemed to call for, this episode is for you. Or if you've ever cried in a work meeting over maybe a comment that wasn't even that bad, or raged at someone you love over something small, or felt a wave of shame so intense it took you completely offline for the rest of the day, I want you to know something before we go any further. You're not broken. You're not lazy. You're not too sensitive. Your brain is just working with a different set of wiring, and today we're going to talk about what that wiring actually looks like, the neuroscience behind ADHD and emotional dysregulation, and more importantly, what you can do about it. So, I'm Tanya. You're listening to Inside the Pickle Jar, where we talk about what it's actually like to live in a neurodivergent brain without the shame and with a whole lot of compassion. So, let's get into it. Here's something I want to lead with because I think it reframes everything. Up to 70% of people with ADHD struggle with emotional regulation. 70%. That's not a quirk. That's not a personality flaw. That is incredibly common part of having an ADHD brain, and it's chronically underrecognized. When I learned this, I thought back to so many moments in my life where I'd been told I was too emotional or overreacting, and I just wish someone had handed me the neuroscience sooner. So that's what I'm going to do today. Let's start at the beginning. The ADHD brain develops differently. Research shows that the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain, responsible for things like planning, impulse control, decision making, and emotional regulation, that can develop up to 3 years later in people with ADHD compared to neurotypical brains. I think that's a fascinating fact. 3 years. And that's not nothing. That's being expected to drive before you've learned to steer. So if you grew up feeling like you couldn't keep up emotionally with your peers, like you were always behind a step in knowing how to handle your feelings, there's a real neurological reason for that. You weren't immature, you weren't failing, your brain was still building the equipment everyone else assumed you already had. And here's what I find really important to name. A lot of us spent years being told the problem was our character, that if we just tried harder, we'd be able to regulate. But you can't try your way into a prefrontal cortex that isn't fully online yet. That's not how brains work. So here's the image I want you to hold on to. Imagine a car with a fully functioning gas pedal and no brakes. In your brain, the amygdala is the gas pedal. It processes emotion, threat, fear, excitement, anger, and it fires fast, like lightning fast. It doesn't wait for permission. The prefrontal cortex is supposed to be the brakes. It's the part that says, hold on, let's think about this. Let's pause before we respond. Let's consider context. In a neurotypical brain, that conversation between the gas pedal and the brakes happens pretty quickly. The emotion fires, the brakes kick in, and you have a moment to choose your response. In an ADHD brain, those brakes are slower. The emotion still fires, often bigger and faster, but the system that's supposed to regulate it is lagging behind. So you react, not because you want to, not because you don't care, but because the emotion arrived before the brakes even had a chance to show up. This is why it can feel like emotions just happen to you rather than something you're choosing, because neurologically, a lot of the time, they kind of are. Now let's talk chemistry, because this piece is huge. ADHD is associated with differences in how your brain uses two neurotransmitters, dopamine and norepinephrine. These aren't just mood chemicals, they're deeply involved in attention, motivation, and emotional regulation. When these systems aren't working effectively, emotions can feel more volatile. things that might feel like a 2 or a 3 on the emotional intensity scale to someone else can register as a 7 or an 8 for you. Not because you're traumatic, because your brain's chemistry is affecting how strongly you experience things. This is also why stimulant medication helps some people with emotional regulation, not just focus. When dopamine and norepinephrine are working more efficiently, that emotional signal processing becomes more regulated too. And even if medication isn't part of your picture, which is completely valid, understanding this helps explain why things feel so big. Your nervous system is not miscalibrated because something is wrong with you. It's calibrated this way because of how your brain is built. I know for myself, a lot of times my ADHD brain, I do great on 2 or 3 cups of coffee. It's also a stimulant, but it isn't medication. So if you're not on medication and you're finding out that caffeine works for you, that might be root cause. So here's where it gets really layered. You have emotional dysregulation in ADHD, and it isn't just about feeling things strongly. It's also connected to executive function, which is our ability to pause, to plan, and respond intentionally. When executive function is struggling, a few things happen. Impulse control goes down, the emotional impulse fires, and then there's less capacity to intercept it before it comes out as words or tears or a slammed door. Frustration tolerance drops. Things that feel manageable on a good day feel absolutely intolerable on a hard one. Recovery takes longer. Once the emotion hits, it can take a really long time to come back down, what some people call emotional stickiness. I want to name that last one personally because it's one of the most confusing parts of my own experience. I could intellectually know that something was over, that I was fine, that the situation had resolved, and still feel it for hours. Still feel the shame or the anger or the hurt, like my brain just couldn't let go. That's not weakness. That's your working memory and emotional regulation systems not being able to update fast enough. The feeling got filed wrong and the cabinet got stuck. So let's talk about emotional stickiness for a second more, because I think this one is deeply under-talked. A lot of us with ADHD experience rumination, replaying conversations, situations, perceived failures, sometimes for days. And it makes sense neurologically. Hyperfocus doesn't just apply to tasks, it can apply to emotions and thoughts too. And man, do I do this a lot, especially when I feel like I failed a conversation or I didn't stand up for myself, and I rehearse that over and over again and how I should have responded, what I should have said, and then I start trying to practice in case it ever happens again. So your brain, my brain, latches on to a painful experience and just keeps returning to it, keeps processing, keeps replaying the tape. And this isn't a flaw in your character. It's a pattern in your neurological wiring. So what I found helpful is recognizing the pattern early, noticing, oh, I'm in the loop again. And rather than fighting it or shaming myself for being in the loop, just gently interrupting it. And we'll talk about some specific skills for this in a bit. There's one more layer I want to add before we get to the thing most people don't talk about, which is rejection sensitivity. Time blindness, something a lot of us experience, actually affects emotional regulation too. When you can't easily perceive time, it's hard to remember that feelings pass. In the middle of a difficult emotion, it can feel like this is how things will always be. The bad feeling isn't just big, it feels permanent. Working memory plays a role too. If you can't easily hold in your mind, I was okay this morning, or I've gotten through this before, while you're in the thick of something, you lose access to the emotional context that would help you regulate. So you're not just feeling things intensely, you're feeling them without the anchors that might help you ride them out. Okay, let's talk about RSD. Rejection sensitive dysphoria. It's a term coined by Dr. William Dodson to describe the intense emotional pain that people with ADHD often feel in response to perceived rejection, criticism, or failure. And I want to name the word perceived because it isn't just about actual rejection. It can be a tone of voice, a pause before someone responds, a friend not texting back, a look you read wrong, a piece of feedback that was probably neutral but landed like a verdict. For people with RSD, that experience can feel physically painful, not metaphorically, literally physically dysregulating in the body. I have this as well. This is why so many of us have spent years walking on emotional eggshells around relationships, around work, around any situation where we might be evaluated or found wanting. It's not paranoia. It's a nervous system that has learned to run very fast risk assessments in a situation that looks like it might end in rejection. And the masking that often comes with ADHD, the constant monitoring, the performing, the trying to read the room, a lot of that is driven by RSD. It's exhausting. It's the masking tax. If you've never had a name for this before, I hope this one helps. Not because naming it fixes it, but because naming it tells you it's real and that it's not just you. Before we get to skills, I want to quickly name the biological factors that can significantly worsen emotional dysregulation. Because if we're not addressing these, no amount of coping skills will fully hold. Sleep. ADHD and sleep issues are deeply connected, and insufficient or disrupted sleep hits emotional regulation hard. If you're running on 4 hours, your breaks are even less reliable than usual. I have a lot of FOMO and I stay up way too late, and then it is hard to get out of bed. So, I'm with all of you if this is a struggle. My executive function around sleep and my sleep hygiene is every day an effort and a challenge. Hunger. Blood sugar fluctuations affect executive function and emotional regulation directly. Many of us with ADHD undereat during the day because we forget or get hyper-focused and miss meals. And then the afternoon crash hits and everything feels harder and worse. When I tell my friends that I forget to eat, they're like, oh, it must be nice. I never forget to eat. I just will, if I'm in flow, if I'm hyper-focusing, food is not on my radar. And if I wait long enough, I stop feeling hungry. So it's a kind of a vicious cycle. So I don't know if any of you are like that, but this is an issue for me. Sensory overload. So if your nervous system is already taxed by noise, light, texture, crowds, whatever your sensory profile looks like, there's less capacity left for emotional regulation. The tank is running closer to empty before the emotional trigger even happens. Now, I'm not saying this to add to the list of things you have to manage. I'm saying it because sometimes what looks like I'm just too emotional is actually, I haven't slept well in a week, I forgot to eat lunch again, and I've been in fluorescent lighting for 8 hours. But those are all solvable things. And I have told my husband if I ever get really down and depressed, to make me eat something and go take a nap every time. And he's been really great about it. So you need a neurotypical partner maybe to help you with these things. Now, I don't want to close the science section without naming something that almost never gets mentioned in these conversations. The intensity of ADHD emotions isn't only a liability. The same wiring that makes you vulnerable to emotional overwhelm is often the same wiring that makes you extraordinarily empathetic, deeply passionate, unusually attuned to others' feelings, able to experience joy, wonder, and connection at an intensity that is genuinely beautiful. When you're lit up about something, you are fully lit up. When you love something, you really love it. When you care about a cause, a person, a project, that care runs deep and real. The goal of emotional regulation isn't to flatten you. It's to help you choose when and how the emotion comes out, so that you get to experience all of that richness without it running your life. Here's the reframe I want to offer before we get to the skills. You don't need to try harder. You need systems that work with your brain. So many of us have spent years being told, directly or indirectly, that we just need more discipline, more willpower, more control. And we tried. We really tried. I still try. And it didn't work, doesn't work. And we concluded the problem was us. But willpower is a prefrontal cortex function. If your prefrontal cortex is still developing, or running on low dopamine, or exhausted from a day of masking, willpower is one of the first things to go. Skills, structures, and external supports aren't crutches. They're how you work with the brain you actually have. The single most important skill in emotional regulation is learning to pause before you react. You can watch several of my other podcast episodes. I'm talking about pause practice, how to get used to making the pause. And I know it always sounds simple, but it's not easy. The pause is the gap between the emotion arriving and your response to it. In that gap, your prefrontal cortex has a chance to come online. The brakes get a moment to engage. The good news, you can train your pause. As I've always said in the past podcasts, you can build the habit of that gap even when your nervous system is firing fast. Some things that help create the pause: a deep breath. One slow, deliberate breath activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part that downregulates the stress response. It buys time, even a few seconds. Physical movement, standing up, leaving the room, taking a walk, changing your physical state can interrupt the emotional momentum. And then you might use a phrase, something you say to yourself. Some people use, "I need a minute." Some people use, "Let me think about it." The goal is just to create a small buffer between stimulus and response. Okay, here are 9 skills that are actually ADHD friendly, meaning they don't require sustained willpower, complex multi-step processes, or perfect conditions. Some grounding techniques. When emotions are big and fast, your nervous system needs to come back into the present moment. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. 5 things you can see, 4 you can hear, 3 you can touch, 2 you can smell, 1 you can taste. Works because it uses your senses to anchor you right now where you're actually safe. Number 2, name the emotion. Research shows that simply naming the emotion out loud or in writing reduces its intensity. I'm really feeling overwhelmed right now. That act of labeling activates your prefrontal cortex, the part trying to regulate. It's not magic, but it's real neuroscience. 3, body-based regulation. Emotions live in the body, your jaw, your chest, your shoulders, your gut. Where do you hold your stress? Regulation often needs to happen in the body before the mind can catch up. Cold water on your face or wrists, progressive muscle relaxation, slow exhale-focused breathing, movement. 4, create external reminders. Because working memory is a factor, building external systems help. A note on your phone that says you felt this before and it passed. A list of things that help you regulate. Prompts visible in your environment. You're not outsourcing your feelings, you're supporting your brain. 5, use the stop skill. Just stop. Take a step back. Observe what you're feeling. Proceed mindfully. This comes from DBT, Dialectical Behavior Therapy, and it's one of the most ADHD accessible regulation frameworks because it's 4 simple steps you can memorize and access even when you're activated. 6, opposite action. When the emotion is pulling you toward a behavior that won't serve you, try the opposite. Shame wants you to hide. Try gentle eye contact. Anger wants to push away. Try moving forward. Fear wants you to avoid. try one small approach. This isn't about suppressing the feeling. It's about interrupting the behavioral pattern attached to it. 7, reduce stimulation. If sensory overload is a factor, and it often is, removing yourself from stimulation can give your nervous system the space it needs to come down. This might look like putting in earplugs, going to a quiet room, dimming lights, or just giving yourself permission to step away from the noise. 8, self-compassion first, processing second. When you're in the middle of a big emotion, problem solving rarely works. The cortisol is too high. The executive function is offline. What often works better is self-compassion first. Then acknowledging that this is hard, it makes sense that you're struggling, that you're not a bad person for feeling this. And then, once you're regulated, processing what happened. 9, build recovery, not just resistance. You will not always catch it before it fires, and that's okay. Emotional regulation isn't about never getting dysregulated. It's about getting better at recovering. How quickly can you come back down? How gently can you treat yourself in the aftermath? That recovery capacity is the real skill. So I want to close the same way I opened. You are not broken. Emotional dysregulation is not a character flaw. It's not laziness, drama, or weakness. It is a neurological reality for most people with ADHD. It is something you can learn to work with. Not by trying harder, by understanding your brain, building systems that support it, and being as gentle with yourself as you would be with a friend. I think about how different things might have been for younger me, in classrooms, in relationships, in my career, if someone had just said, your emotions aren't too big, your brain just needs different tools. That was definitely not the message I got growing up. So that's what I hope you take from this today. Not a homework list, just the knowledge that there are some real reasons for what you've been experiencing, and that real things can help. If this episode was useful, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've got feelings about what we talked about today, I mean in the most literal sense, come find me. I'm at InsideThePickleJar.com, and this community is exactly the place to bring them. So be gentle with yourself, pickle friend, and I'll see you next time inside the jar.